Hey everyone, hope you're doing well. Today on Collection Lessons, I want to talk about rent to own by doing it yourself, not one of those things. It's part of the Collection Lessons series. Anything you say on this channel is not anything advice, and let's get into it. So, rent to own, with the video previous of how much a mortgage plus total cost of ownership costs, can you rent and then just buy a house straight out? And I believe you can in 10 years. This is just, my opinion, and this is the goal that I'm working towards. Some notes similar to last time: inflation is removed. That's inflation on the house, total cost of ownership, and rent. Because, the total cost of ownership, if you buy wood now versus buy wood in 10 years, likely the wood looks like it costs more. So that's why inflation is removed from all these calculations. $180,000, or sorry, a $350,000 house now, let's say, is going to be $350,000 25 years from now. Inflation, like I say in another video, is basically what the housing follows. So like the 2% that a house gets every year, 2-3%, that's also the cost of inflation that year. So I don't think that a house appreciates, in my opinion. It stays the same value. It's always deteriorating, so you always need to upkeep it, and that's what total cost of ownership is: things that homeowners pay for that you don't have to pay for when you rent. The average mortgage rate in this case is going to be about 2%. This is just a graph, percent and time inflation. The housing market, recognize that the housing market does fluctuate because there's supply and demand and all this type of thing. There's an up and down, but generally it goes in the same direction as inflation. So let's get into it. So what I want to talk about in this one, this is another sheet that I have that I was talking about, similar to the last time. This time, mortgage is $1,500. Total cost of ownership is about the same as mortgage. That's what I fully believe in. And then renting is $1,500, and then investing is $1,500. So instead of the total cost of ownership that a homeowner has, you got investing on the renting side. Let's compare them. Let's see how it goes. So this is those numbers up here. After 10 years, you have $180,000 of basically upkeep to your house, whereas the mortgage, you've paid off about, I was going to get you a graph basically, which I have on another tab. But basically, after 10 years, your mortgage is $180,000 paid down from about a $450,000 mortgage. That's explained in here. 25 years, a $350,000 house, this is what we're comparing to, is costing about $450,000 over the course of the 25-year term, because that's what the interest added to it is. On another tab, this is one for Canadian houses and a mortgage. We put these numbers in here. $350,000, 25 years, 5-year mortgage term, pay it monthly, interest rate 2%, it's about $1,500. In here, this is where the principal is $350 and the interest is almost $100. I just rounded just for easy, simple use type thing. Interest rate could be higher, whatever. It's easier just to not muck with, percentages and dots and whatever. Anyway, as you can see, over the course of this 10 years, you paid down about or your mortgage principal balance is down to $230, and then over the time, right, the interest kind of flattens out. You pay more of principal rather than the interest that you're paying, right? That's normal, and I explained that in the previous video. So yeah, this looks like this. You can pause it if you want to look at this anymore. It's up to you. Anyway, going back to here. So at the end of 25 years, you'll own your house that's worth $350,000. You paid $450 for it. You paid more than its value. That's how normal financing works. And then the total cost of ownership, basically to keep the house alive, plus the things that you pay for when you own a house that renters don't pay for, is there as well. That's basically a complete wash, right? I hope we can kind of agree on that. That's also with the agreement that basically what the mortgage is, you're paying that much in total cost of ownership. Right, I explained that in the previous video of property taxes, house insurance, any alarms, any things like water, any things that get fixed, renos, that type of thing, such as water heater, furnace, washer, dryer, sink, taps, whatever. Need some wood to put a deck up or whatever, anything. The total cost of ownership, in my mind, is generally the same as a mortgage, or it should be. If it's not, likely you end up suffering in the long term from the degradation of your house, and that shows up when you sell the house, that you can't sell it for what you think it should be worth or what it's valued at. So anyway, that's in the previous video if you want to look at that. These are some numbers. Renting, so the rent is the same as the mortgage. Everyone always says, well, if you're paying this much in rent, you might as well pay the mortgage. We're going to try the renting tactic on this side. This is how much you pay after 10 years. It's exactly the same. And then it's exactly the same after 25 years. Makes sense? I hope so, because basically it's just times 300, which is 25 years times 12 months, I think that's 300. If my calculations are off, my bad. But this is basically what it is. I'm pretty sure these numbers are right. Instead of your total cost of ownership, you put $1,500 a month into savings, and then you invest it, right? You hopefully build an emergency fund, that type of thing, and then you invest. So we're gonna go with the investing strategy this time, not just the savings. If you look at the savings, we're going to be saving pretty much as we're paying rent, right? And it's like, well, after 25 years, and you have this much in savings because the rent is completely gone, your mortgage is gone. This is just a wash, right? You could buy the house in cash after 25 years. It's pretty much exactly the same. Oh, instead of, you know, as having a mortgage, if you think of it like that. This is basically pure equity going to something that generally goes up in an up direction. We're going to compound it and see how it goes. So on the right here, if you just save, right, you're going to be getting this, and then at the end, you're going to see this number after 10 years, you're going to see this number after 25 years. That's just by saving. However, if you invested in something, and you invested in something that gains 1% per year, 1% per year, just one, which I'll show you the stock market and everything else is way more than 1%. 1% per year, after 10 years, you come up with this. You're like, cool, an extra 9 grand, or cool, an extra 50, 60 grand. That's great. And as you gain it, right, you gain it every, month, everything like that. If you basically divide the APR into 12 months and basically apply it, that's what it is, right? So like, it'd be like $15, right? Is 1%, but we're dividing it over a 12-month span. So this month you're only getting $1, this month you're getting more, and then you're getting more and more and more, and it's always growing, and then you reinvest it into the existing, or back into what it was the next month, and that's why it continues growing up. Does that make sense? Right, this $10 gets put into here, you add your $1,500 from that month, it gets added to here, and then now you're making $11.29 that month. So it's compounding, right? And if you look at a graph, generally it's going to go whoop like this. Now, if you increase this, if you, let's say, get 1%, which is very low, in my opinion, that's like a savings account, you'll end up with this, right? Remember, the house only costs $350. Just remember this. So, like, the house is $350, and if you just save, you'll buy the house with cash, the $350 house in cash, as well as you'll have $100K extra. So you could theoretically, probably after about 20 years, you could probably own the house just by saving. Just by saving whatever you rent, that amount you also saved. Just by saving. Just want to point that out there. Because the house is only $350. The mortgage interest makes it $450. But you can own a house that's $350. Remember, this is taking out the whole like inflation thing down the road, that type of thing. You can own a house faster, in my opinion, than somebody who has a mortgage. Just by saving. What you're renting, if the mortgage number and the rent number are the same, in my opinion, if you put that amount, the same amount as the total cost of ownership in savings, you will come out ahead. This is just my opinion. These are my numbers. This is my show. Congrats. But we're going to be playing with percents. Now, looking at a stock market, traditional stock market, this is from Wealthsimple. This talks about, average stock return over time. Dow Jones, some months or some years you have about 29 to 30%. Sometimes you just stay like in a bear market or whichever, and you just kind of go down to like a little percent. So over an average of 2 years, you can see that this basically is in between those two numbers, right? So if we just take historically returns, so 14% for the S&P 500 is 14% that you can add on to here. So we'll add it back to our numbers, so 14%. Now remember, a house costs $350,000. That's how much that house costs. After 10 years, just the S&P 500, you bought the house. This is why I think renting and investing basically the same number as your housing is, you can get a house in 10 years. You can pay off a mortgage in 10 years. If you want to think of it in a mortgage term, you can own your house in 10 years. I don't know how many times I have to say that, but you can own a house in 10 years rather than in 25 years. And if you continue with that compounding theory, you will have about $4 million at the end. Remember, that house is $350,000, so you could buy how many houses? Like 3, 6, 9, maybe just over 9 houses after 25 years rather than one house with interest. And then you had debt the entire way. If you remember, this is all debt the entire way because a mortgage is debt. You can't get out of it, and they take your house if you can't pay it. right? Somebody comes knocking, hey, why don't you pay your debt? It's a mortgage, it's debt, right? So you could be debt free, completely debt free, just save, you'll own your house more. With percentages, you throw it into a market of sorts. This is 14%. This is basically what the last 10 years were. We can go down to like, like the longer term where, before the whole compounding and everything, we can put it at 6 for this. We can put it at any of these numbers. And let's go back to here. We can put it at 6%. And look at, you still can almost own a house after 10 years if you just do a 6. But I mean, if you're also into like, you diversify, and you don't just rely on one market, and you also put some in something volatile, like, crypto, let's say, where it's done about 10,000 or 1,000%, right? And it's like, you could buy so many houses with these. You could probably buy it in after 1 year if it works out that way, right? These are ridiculous numbers, in my opinion. I don't think they're sustainable for sure. But, every year on year, that type of thing. But just an easy like 10% a year, and you're pretty close to the 350. Right? And then, you can do whatever you want with this. You can be anything, right? Like, you can just save, you can invest, you can do both, you can put it into risky things, you can put it into non-risky things. You can be debt-free the entire way, and that's my idea, and that's our goal. And that's why we want to do it this way. We're already, a year or two, we just paying off, the debts and stuff that we had before with the video before with the mortgage life. And so this is basically going to be straight on to track, right? And it's like, once you start making, let's say per month, 10 years, and then let's say if you just make like $4,000 from your investments, you could also choose at this point to quit your job, right? Most people, they make about 2 to 4K a month. You could quit your job after this many months, and then you just live off of the investments, right? And that's where, like I mentioned before in another video, where you go from the left side of active income to the right side of passive income, where it's like, it's not time for dollars anymore. Now your money's just making your money. That's the idea. That's the whole idea, right? You put any number in here and you can play with this. You can play with whatever numbers you want. I know that's, you can mess with the numbers, make them look as fake as you want. But that's why I think investing and saving alone, you have way more options of things you don't want to pay for, or places you want to live if you don't get locked into a 25-year mortgage. And most people, they buy a house, they stay in it for 5-10 years, and then they buy another house. They restart their 25-year mortgage again. It's like, that's ridiculous. Like, why not buy the good house that you want the first time? You might as well just save and rent, and then just buy it flat out, right? Or whatever you want. I know. That's just my opinion on it. I wanted to show the own in 10-year plan. This is my idea of own in 10-year. Whatever your rent is, you put that into investing. You compound it with, some sort of market, either like any of these markets, or, volatile markets, crypto, whatever, or Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, anything, right? You put it in something that maintains your value above, like what I mentioned before, above, inflation. You put in anything that maintains its value better, that actually appreciates over time, then you're going to get ahead financially. Sure, I think renting could be better than owning a house in the long term, but our goal is to, buy a house, buy 2 houses, buy 3, maybe even, I don't know, buy a cabin, that type of thing, and then pass it down for generations to come, so that our, next generations, like my kids and their kids and everything from there, continue to grow the wealth that our family, that I'm trying to create, and even, share it, of course, with my parents. If you're watching, hi Mom, like, sharing it with everybody up and down of your, like, family tree, right? And that's why I want to create this type of life, and that's why I think that, based on calculations, based on people I talk to, based on what the housing market looks like, you can get way better returns to pay for your house, rather than suffering through a mortgage with the total cost of ownership likely being around the same as your mortgage. And that's just living in it. That's not to do with selling it, and then, like I mentioned before, this technically went even more. So, I want to show you with this video, I think that you can rent and invest and be better ahead financially than just settling with a mortgage. Plus, like, your whole percentages are going to be better too. Like, if this is 25% of your housing, of your budget after tax, and then you go into this situation and it turns out to be 50%, my opinion, I think you'll be house broke. I think where it's comparable would be if renting is both of these combined. If your mortgage is $750, your total cost of ownership is $750, that's when it's like, okay, those numbers, right? You can put these numbers in here. And then it's like, okay, well, you're definitely not probably going to be owning that $350,000 house. It's going to be a different, smaller house. So you can do whatever you want, right? You put a bigger down payment if you want to do that, but then you're saving up for that as well, which is basically you're probably renting and investing or saving, whatever you want. But anyway, wanted to share that. I think mortgage and renting are totally different things. You shouldn't be comparing a rent number to a mortgage number. You should be comparing a rent number to both of these combined. That's my opinion. Thanks.